Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today, after seeing how the Cupra Born handles in terms of range and real life energy consumption, we are going to dissect it and talk about the way it drives, the way it looks, and everything you need to know about it in today's video. So what is the Cupra Born? Well, it's basically the Spanish equivalent of the Volkswagen ID3. It's a car built on the exact same MEB platform as the ID3, the ID4, ID5, so many other models in the Volkswagen Audi group right now, including the Q4 and so on. So this is the Cupra equivalent, if you will, because in case you didn't know, Cupra is the sportier alternative to Seat. It's a new brand, a standalone brand established not too long ago, that's supposed to offer the customers a sportier and more upmarket version of the Seat models, which in turn are based on Volkswagen models. Complicated? Yeah, I know, it seems complicated, but in all reality, in all fairness, it's not really that hard. This is basically a more aggressive and a better looking version of the ID3 for customers who want a different approach. Think of it as the difference between the Golf and the Golf GTI. Even though the specs are the same, but this car looks a lot more aggressive. And I have to say I'm a fan of this design, and I actually appreciate it a lot. So if you've ever seen an ID3, probably you're gonna recognize a lot of the stuff you've seen on it on the Cupra Born as well. Most of the windows are similar, the C-pillar is similar, but to their credit, the guys from Cupra did create a new identity for the car, and I actually appreciate the way it looks. So we have the Cupra badge up front, we have the Cupra name over here, we have different headlights, we have the copper accents all around the car. The copper accents have been a trademark feature for the Cupra models ever since they were launched. And we have the same pattern on the wheels. Now you can get 18-inch or 20-inch wheels. The wheel size can vary from 18 to 20 inch. These are 19-inch wheels, and they actually look really good. So from the side, you'll also notice we have new side sills, and everything looks a lot more aggressive. And that whole point is brought home by the rear end of the car, where we have a huge spoiler up here up front. We have a diffuser on the bottom of the rear bumper. We have new tail lamps, an LED strip connecting them, and of course the Cupra badge for the opening of the boot. So I think this car has a lot of personality. I think it looks a lot better than the ID3, and I think it's going to be a sales success for people who actually want a car that makes a statement. So I've been getting a lot of thumbs up driving this car around town. There aren't a lot of them over here in Eastern Europe. As for the boot, it still has 385 liters. Nothing changed in that regard compared to the ID3. Now let's hop in the car and see what changes happened inside. So this is the interior of the Cupra Born. Not a lot has changed compared to the ID3, but the changes that have been made do give this car a unique identity. So we still have these copper accents over here on the center console, around the air vents, on the door cards, and they do give the car a little more spice. We have a new trim over here on the dashboard, a trim that has this triangular shape motif on it, and the same motif is replicated on the door cards and on the seats. As you can see, the seats are probably the highlight of this interior. They look great, they feel great, they offer a lot of side support, and they are incredibly comfortable to the touch. They are wrapped in this microfiber material, and I think they will withstand the test of time rather brilliantly. Other changes done compared to the ID3 include the same material used on the center console or on the seats being used on this area right behind the steering wheel that gives this interior a more premium feel. Now the plastics used aren't all that great, to be honest. So you'll notice the door cards are done in scratchy plastic, and part of the dashboard as well, excluding this area right here behind the steering wheel and behind the infotainment screen. Since this car is built on the same platform as the ID3, some things have been kept on. For example, the touch sensitive buttons on the steering wheel are still here, and I am yet to hear someone who's a fan of this implementation. Not even Volkswagen officials aren't too stoked about this system. The same touch sensitive area at the bottom of the infotainment screen still present over here. It's not illuminated at night, so if you want to turn up or turn down the volume, it's going to be a trip. The same goes for the temperature gauges. However, compared to the ID3, I think the Cupra system, infotainment system, works a bit better. I like the menus a bit more, and I like the graphics a bit more as well. They look better. So yeah, not tricky at all. And I think everyone's going to use Apple CarPlay and Android Auto anyway, so this is not going to be a huge issue. But controlling the temperature, the volume, and a lot of the functions on the steering wheel will be a trip. Speaking of the steering wheel, it's a really nicely done one. Not too thick, not too thin, and I love the leather on it. It's perforated on the sides. The steering wheel itself is flat at the bottom, and we have an instrument cluster behind it that looks exactly the same as on the ID3, but it has a different graphics inside it. So that's about it. Let's hop in the back and see how things shape up over there. Getting in and out of the rear area of the Cupra Born is easy to do, not an issue whatsoever. The seat is pretty high. There's plenty of room, as you can tell. The driver's seat has been adjusted to my comfortable driving position. I'm 6 feet tall and about 250 pounds, and this is how another person of my size would fit in the back, and I think it's a very good mix. You could probably carry 4 adults without an issue whatsoever in the back of this car. So yeah, the materials used on the door cards are a bit cheaper feeling. The plastic feels a bit scratchier, but overall I think it's a good mix for this car. Plenty of room in the back, as I already said, for 2 adults. The materials on the seats are also quite good. I love the design even of the seat backs of the front seats. They look really good. Plenty of storage space and 2 USB-C chargers over here in the back. So let's hop behind the wheel and see how this car drives. Now that we hopped behind the wheel of the Cupra Born, let's talk about the specs. So, as I mentioned a number of times already, probably getting exhausting, this car is built on the same MEB platform as the ID3, the Q4, the ID5, the ID4, and so on. So it will share most of its underpinnings with those cars. That means whatever motors or power versions you get on the ID3 will be available on this car as well, but the availability will depend on the market you're in. Now, the car we're driving is the 204 horsepower version with 310 Newton meters of torque and a 58 kilowatt hour battery. But there are other models available as well. For example, a 231 horsepower version called e-Boost, and another one with 77 kilowatt hours stored in the battery, so with a battery of 77 kilowatt hours. There's a less powerful version as well, but the battery choices remain stuck at these 2 options. So depending on your needs, you have a couple of choices at your disposal, but the one we're driving is, I think, the best pick of the range, because it has enough range for most people. It's not too expensive, and you don't really need more power. So this is a rear-wheel drive car, and it is incredibly fun to drive. That rear axle motor has instant torque, and the car just zips off the line. Of course, that's if you have, I don't know, enough grip, because today it has been kind of murky, and there's a lot of sludge on the road. So I could get the rear end of the car to slide rather easily with no issues whatsoever. But that also implies a certain amount of risk I was taking. And I found this car to be incredibly fun to drive. Now, the suspension is also quite brilliant. We have a multi-link setup front and back. It's not too soft, it's not too firm, it's just right. And combined with these seats, which are incredibly comfortable and also very supportive at the same time, you get a great driving experience. So overall, this is, if you ask me, this is the modern day equivalent of a hot hatch. It's fast enough. It's around 7.3 seconds to 100 kilometers an hour. It's powerful enough for most people. It's fun to drive. I like the steering. It's very direct. The brake is also quite predictable, unlike on many electric cars. And the throttle is instant. The throttle response is instant. So it's a really fun car to drive. The nose feels really light. So when you're steering and when you're, I don't know, pushing this car too hard into the bend, the nose will feel extremely light on the exit. So if you accelerate hard on the exit, you get the tail moving a bit, and the nose will feel rather light, and it's quite a brilliant feeling, if I'm honest. It reminds me of the Miata MX-5, even though this is a much heavier car overall. So I like the design of this car. Of course, that aggressive design does come with a couple of caveats. For example, this car is less aerodynamic compared to the ID3, but not by a lot, because the ID3 has a drag coefficient of 0.267. This one has a drag coefficient of 0.27. So it's not a huge difference. I don't think it will make a huge difference in terms of range, but I really like the way this car looks. And in terms of range, since I mentioned it, I did my usual range test. You can check it over here. It was published before this full review. So the Cupra brand claims about 400 kilometers of range out of this car. That's not going to be achievable, at least not in the conditions I test drove the car in. It's pretty cold. It's December. Everybody's out and about trying to get gifts for the holiday season, so it's really crowded, incredibly heavy traffic, and so on. So around town, I got a rather huge energy consumption figure. With the freezing temperatures and all, it was over 23 kilowatt hours, but the average speed was around 10 miles an hour. So yeah, not great. Outside the city limits, on a series of B roads, between 15 and 16 kilowatt hours of energy per 100 kilometers covered, and on the highway around 22, 23. So a range going between 250 kilometers to 400 kilometers, depending on the situation, the average speed, and the temperature, which is okay, but it's not up to par with the claims of the brand. But that's understandable. The numbers the car brands are publishing are best case scenarios, whereas during my test, well, I was faced with worst case scenario situations or conditions. But luckily you can charge this car up pretty fast. So if you have the 58 kilowatt hour battery, you can use a fast charger of up to 120 kilowatts. If you have the 77 kilowatt hour battery, you can charge it up with using 135 kilowatt chargers. There aren't a lot of those around, so probably you'll be using 50 kilowatt chargers or 75 kilowatt chargers, but they will prove to be fast enough anyway for most situations. You can also charge this car using a Type 2 charger at 11 kilowatts AC power, or you can charge it at home at a regular socket, but that's going to take at least 20 hours, so it's not exactly recommended unless you can do that overnight and you don't drive a lot during the day. But what I love the most about this car is that it's it's an attention magnet. So everyone's looking at you. I understand that. I mean, over here in Eastern Europe, they just started selling these cars. This is basically the second car in this country. So yeah, people will look at it in a funny way a lot of the time, but most of them will be curious about what it actually is, what it stands for, and it looks really, really good. And I love the way it looks. I love the interior. It's a lot different compared to the ID3, even though the general layout is the same. It's a quiet, comfortable car when you want it to be, and you can actually have fun with it if you want to. So yeah, I really like the Cupra Born, and I like it more than the ID3 it is based on. And since the price difference isn't all that huge between them, I would probably go for the Cupra Born if I was to buy myself an electric car in this segment. Furthermore, just like the ID3, you can steer quite a lot with it. So it has a rather tight turning radius. Furthermore, the wheels are positioned towards the far extremities of the car, so the overhangs are rather short, so you can position this car quite precisely whenever you want it to do that. And around town that comes in handy because you can park this car rather easily. You have a 385-liter boot for some practicality, and yeah, I actually like this car. Now, as far as pricing goes, roughly 40,000 euros as a starting price for these cars, depending on the market. I can't really talk about everyone's market. This car is 48,000 euros, and yeah, it's a bit expensive. That's where the hot hatch comparison ends, because hot hatches were so loved over the years in the past because they were fun to drive, but they came with a rather affordable price. That no longer seems to be the case, and it's a shame. What I would like to know is which car you would buy in this segment. If you'd go for the ID.3, if you would go for the Cupra Born, or maybe other cars from other manufacturers like the Renault Megane E-Tech and so on. Let me know in the comment section below. This has been my review of the Cupra Born. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, don't forget to feed your passions, and of course like, share and subscribe to this channel. Ciao.